Hi everyone, my name is Richard Santoro and I welcome you to Third and Zen, the YouTube channel where every week I'm sharing a spiritual message to nourish ourselves, heart, mind, body, and soul. First, thanks for stopping by the channel. Thank you for checking out today's video. I do hope this video finds you doing well. I hope you're taking the time to care for yourself, heart, mind, body, and soul. Next, again, thanks for stopping by the channel. If you feel like liking, subscribing, sharing, that's very much appreciated. But either way, thank you for you. Thank you for being here. As you can see, I'm on the beach. I hope the waves or the wind isn't too loud. But I just wanted to share a message while I was here. So why don't we all just take a moment. Take a nice deep breath. Just get yourself situated. Give yourself permission to just be still. To just be here, to just be present. Let's get started with today's message, shall we? So I want to come at today's message from three different angles and hopefully all landing in the same place with a coherent bit of a message, coherent bit of fruit for us. So first things first, when I was with my church, and I led our youth group. Every year we'd go out east for a retreat. I know I've referenced this before. And one year on the Sundays of the retreat, we would go to the chapel on the water and we'd have a worship service. And it was always wonderful. And one year we used one of my favorite hymns, number 369 in the United Methodist Hymnal, Blessed Assurance. Blessed Assurance. Still one of my favorite hymns. I love it so much. I used it in worship service so many times. And the heart of that hymn, the heart of what we used in that hymn, really actually became quite a mantra from that worship service for our youth. And the hymn is, "This is my story, this is my song. This is my story, this is my song." And in that particular worship service, we spent almost 3 hours. Normally it's like a good 45 minutes, hour. But we spent almost 3 hours talking to the kids and the kids talking to us. Everybody just talking about their story, sharing their story, or whatever part of their story they wanted to share. And it was a way that we all told each other that our stories are safe with each other, that our stories are ours to tell. We can tell whatever part of our story we want, as little or as much, and only we get to tell our story. Only we get to define what our story is all about. Only we get to share that, and we share that with whoever we want to, whomever we trust, whomever we feel safe with, whomever is going to love and embrace our story and not choose to tell us what our story should be or what our story is or what parts of our story we need to tell or how our story should go. So it was a safe place for the kids and the adults, and we discovered sharing our story is such a valuable thing, and even introspectively for ourselves, knowing what our story is and loving all the parts of it, the traumatic parts, the sad parts, the challenging parts, loving all of ourselves, including our story. So that became a really special, blessed thing for all of us, and something that carried over into the years with the youth of our church. So that's part one. So let's let that land and just hang on to that for a moment. The other part is I'm reminded in this moment, and reminded with that story about our stories, of Jim Croce, I Got a Name. I just love that song. It's one of my favorite songs. Jim Croce was such a wonderful artist. It was taken too soon. But in that song, he says, "I got a name," and he holds it proud. He says, "This is my name." And he talks about it in the song a little bit. And part and parcel of "This is my story" is I've got a name. Again, we get to tell our story. We get to say who we are and what our name is, what our identity is really where I'm going with that Jim Croce part of I've Got a Name. It's our identity. We choose it. We choose our story. We choose our identity. We choose who we are. Nobody else gets to tell us that. Nobody else. People can help us with it if we need it. People can be part of our identity. People can be part of our story, of course. But in the end, it's up to us. It's up to you what your story is. It's up to you what your name is, what your identity is, what defines you, what makes you you. And I love that. I just love that so much. I love that I get to tell my story, that I get to own my story, that I get to own my identity, that I get to be the one to say, this is who I am and this is what I'm about. And nobody else gets to do that. And that's a beautiful, sacred, wonderful thing. So I'm just imparting that to all of us as a reminder. And now the third phase of this story is Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene. I spoke about her during Lent, towards the end, coming to Holy Week. I'll post a link to that particular message. Mary Magdalene. There's a moment in the Gospel of John. As I mentioned previously, Mary Magdalene is placed at the tomb of Jesus in all four of the Gospels. And in the Gospel of John, she goes to the tomb of Jesus because she's just heartbroken. She's totally heartbroken. And that Sunday morning, she sees a man that she doesn't recognize. Love the sound of the birds. She sees a man that she doesn't recognize, and she thinks he's the gardener. Now, there's a lot of theology and meaning there, but we won't go down that path. She doesn't recognize this man, and she knows the tomb is empty, and she doesn't understand what's happening. And she asks this man, she's distraught, and she says, have you seen where they've taken my master? Have you seen where they've taken it? And she turns away, distraught, and the man says her name, Mary. And the moment the man says her name, she turns around and she knows it's Jesus. Jesus calls her by name, by her name, and she knows her name. And Jesus turns around and says, we're going. Jesus, she knew it was him just because he knew her name, he knew her identity, and he assured her with that loving, empathetic, understanding, kind, merciful, graceful Mary. And that's when she knew in that moment. And there's a lot going on there, and there's a lot to be said there. And two things I want to point out. For one, in the Gospel of John, among other ways that Jesus identifies himself, the Gospel of John has Jesus giving 7 I am statements to identify and to point to who he is. Because that's a big part of the Gospel of John, identifying who Jesus is. And one of those identifiers, one of those I am statements is, I am the Good Shepherd. And part of being the Good Shepherd, as Jesus describes in his Gospel, is knowing his sheep by name. Knowing his sheep by name. Knowing their identity. Knowing who they are. So in that moment at the tomb, the Good Shepherd calls Mary by name. And Mary responds to that. And I think what's so awesome about that, it's beautiful the way it is. But then fast forward, hundreds and hundreds of years later in the Middle Ages, there is a pope who gives a sermon and says that Mary was a prostitute before meeting Jesus. There's no scriptural evidence of this. There was no historical evidence of this prior to this moment, but that's what this pope said, and that non-fact stuck, and it even still persists to this day. But it's only, it's only in the last 150 or so years that wise people pointed out, no, that pope was wrong. That pope misidentified who Mary was. That pope misidentified Mary's story. And it's wonderful. That's not wonderful, don't get me wrong, but it just goes to show that some people can misidentify a person's story. Some people can misidentify a person's identity. Whereas Jesus, the Good Shepherd, calls Mary by name and knows her true identity. So between Blessed Assurance, this is my story, between Jim Croce, I've got a name, and between Mary knowing her identity and Jesus knowing her identity, and people getting Mary's identity, Mary Magdalene's identity wrong, it's important for us to remind ourselves that we tell our story. We own our story. We get to write our story. And our story is still going on. And most of our stories include pain and trauma and challenges and difficulties and joys and wonderful things. And it's up to us. It's up to us to define our story, to tell our story. It's up to us who we choose to share our story with. It's not up to anybody else to write our story, to say, this is your story. No, this is my story. And it's up to us to identify who we are. To say, this is my name. This is my identity. And this is what that means. It's not up to anybody else to say, this is who you are. This is who you should be. Yes, we can include those people that love and respect and appreciate and understand and empathize and care and embrace and recognize the sacredness and value of our story and our identity. We can include those people, and they can be included in the story and in our identity. That's up to us, nobody else. Now, I want to just end it with this. One of the wonderful things about the hymn, Blessed Assurance, and if you're familiar with the hymn like I am, you might have thought to yourself what the rest of that lyric is that I excluded, and I did that on purpose because I wanted to end with it. Yes, that wonderful hymn, Blessed Assurance, says, this is my story, this is my song. And that's the part we embraced with the youth, and that's the part I'm talking about here in this video. But in addition to that, the line goes on, this is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. It's up to us to include Jesus in our story if we so choose. And Jesus will indeed call us by name like he did with Mary. So that's up to us, and he is there, the Good Shepherd, waiting for us to be a part of our story, and for him to be a part of our story, and for us to be a part of his story. For him to be a part of our identity and who we are, if we so choose. He will call us by name. He knows us by our name and our identity and our story. And again, this is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. That's there for us if we want. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Okay, my friends, thanks be to God. And thank you for all of you for being here today. I hope, again, that this video finds you doing well. I hope you had, this video is going to come out a little bit after Easter. I hope you had a good and blessed holiday season, a good and blessed Easter. And I hope, again, that you're remembering to take the time to care for yourself, heart, mind, body, and soul. I hope you're remembering that you are worthy and worth the time, the care, the love, the empathy, the understanding from others and from yourself, whatever it is you need, heart, mind, body, and soul. So you go, you write your story, you embrace your story, own your story, remember it's yours and yours alone. Nobody else gets to say what your story is, and nobody else gets to define your identity. Okay? I love you all. Thank you for stopping by. I wish you nothing but peace, love, and fellowship with God in your journey. Ciao, everybody. I love you.